Imagine for a moment you are standing alone in a vast open field just before sunrise. There is no sound, only the hush of expectancy. The darkness isn't oppressive. It feels ancient, even sacred. And then, with no fanfare, the first golden thread of light breaks the horizon. It doesn't force itself. It simply appears. The shadows don't fight it. They dissolve. That light? It is not just from the sky. It is from within you. And it never left. As Emmet Fox once taught, the light of Christ is not something you must chase. It is something you must uncover. It was placed in you at the beginning, not as a distant prize, but as your core essence. You are not waiting for light. You are waking to it. So before we journey inward, I invite you to like and subscribe, but only if it truly resonates with your soul. Now, breathe into this truth. The light within you is not fragile. It cannot be extinguished by hardship, betrayal, fatigue, or delay. It is not conditional on your mood or your track record. It is not delayed until you get it right. The inner sun shines because that is what it does. No matter the fog of fear, the weight of shame, or the density of confusion, the light still burns. Right now, in you. You've been taught to fear your fluctuations, that if you aren't feeling high vibrational at all times, you've somehow failed. But the light within you doesn't require your perfect emotional state to keep shining. The sun doesn't ask the clouds for permission to rise, and your spirit doesn't ask your wounds for approval to radiate. Yes, there are days when doubt speaks louder than wisdom, days when grief clings like smoke and faith feels like fantasy. But even in those moments, especially in those moments, your light is not gone. It is simply obscured. And obscurity is not erasure. You must understand this. Your light is not a result. It is not a reward for good behavior, nor a trophy for the spiritually advanced. It is the origin. It is what you are made of. And when you begin to see yourself from that knowing, everything changes. You stop grasping for external reassurance. You stop contorting yourself to meet imaginary standards. You begin instead to radiate. Radiance is not performance. It is permission. When you stop trying to earn your worth and begin to express your truth, the radiance comes naturally. Not as spectacle, but as signature. You were not born to be ordinary. You were born to be original. Not to shine in comparison, but in essence. Your essence. The inner sun is not religious. It is not bound to a doctrine or a denomination. It is the sacred clarity that burns at the center of your being, the spark of Christ consciousness that transcends culture, creed, and conditioning. It is not the worship of a figure. It is the embodiment of a state. And this state is not floaty or vague. It is practical. It is powerfully grounded. It sharpens your mind and softens your heart. It reveals truth without condemnation. It awakens responsibility without shame. It shows you that you are not broken, but also that your patterns matter, that every thought you entertain, every belief you defend, every word you repeat, they are all part of what you are radiating. So today, you are invited, not commanded, to return to that center, not to fake peace, not to suppress pain, but to reconnect with the only thing that has ever truly been real in you, your divine identity. You do not need to chase awakening. You need to remember alignment. Alignment with what is already alive in you. Alignment is not about being perfectly positive. It is about being radically honest. Because the truth is not always polite, but it is always liberating. Let this sink in. You are not in search of your light. You are not waiting for a miracle to fall on you. You are the miracle in motion. And every time you remember that, you give others permission to remember it in themselves. That's what the world needs now. Not more noise, not more trends, not more spectacle. It needs presence, powerfully quiet, steady, awake, like the sun. And just like the sun, you don't need to explain your glow. You simply rise. Fear, in its most deceptive form, poses as something real. It enters your mind cloaked in logic, backed by memory, reinforced by habit. But when brought into the light of spiritual truth, it reveals itself for what it has always been, a shadow with no substance, a movement without a source. And like any shadow, it disappears the moment light is cast upon it. You've been taught that fear is to be avoided, suppressed, or pushed through with gritted teeth. But none of those strategies free you. They merely prolong the illusion, because fear, when misunderstood, rules silently. It shapes decisions. It tightens your body. It narrows your thinking. It mutates your dreams into obligations and your potential into performance. But fear only has as much power as you grant it. It has no creative life of its own. It borrows from your belief. It feeds on your attention. It survives only through your agreement. You are the one keeping it alive, not consciously, not maliciously, but by forgetting what you are. Fear cannot stand alone. It needs a story to animate it. A what-if, a past wound, an imagined outcome. But when you return to principle, to what is eternally true, those stories lose grip. They don't disappear in an instant, but they are no longer in charge, because the light of principle does not argue with fear. It replaces it. Emmet Fox once described fear as false evidence appearing real. But it's not enough to know this intellectually. You must feel the shift in your body when you stop believing fear's report. You must notice how your shoulders drop, how your breath deepens, how your thinking expands. This is not a spiritual performance. This is alignment returning. Fear may speak first. It often does. But truth speaks last, and truth always outlasts. When fear tells you that you are alone, truth reminds you that the Christ light never leaves its source. When fear says you've run out of time, truth reveals that divine timing is not on a clock, it is in consciousness. When fear screams that you're not enough, truth whispers that nothing real can be measured by comparison. You are not weak because fear visits you. It visits all of us. But its arrival is not a signal to collapse. It is a signal to awaken, to pause, not in panic, but in power. To recognize that you are the thinker of your thoughts, the chooser of your state, the activator of your faith. And this activation isn't theatrical. It's subtle, sovereign, silent. It is the moment you choose, despite the tremble, to return your awareness to the spiritual fact that you are never at the mercy of outer conditions, that what God is, you are in essence, that you are not reacting to life, you are radiating it. When fear rises, it often brings urgency, a demand to fix, to act, to resolve at all costs. But that urgency is counterfeit. It is not clarity, it is noise. The Christ light within you never rushes, it reveals. It brings not anxiety, but authority, and with authority comes calm, and in calm the answers come. This is how fear loses its grip, not by fighting it head-on, but by making it irrelevant. When you become more interested in truth than in self-protection, fear no longer has fuel. When you become willing to stand in spiritual fact even when emotions waver, fear finds no home in you. Let's be clear. This is not about pretending you're fearless. It's about remembering you are anchored, rooted, equipped. Because when you are anchored in truth, fear may knock, but it cannot enter. It may shout, but it cannot command. It may linger, but it cannot shape your decisions. Your task is not to become some mythical version of brave. Your task is to stay centered in what is real, even when fear is present. This is the practice. This is the power. Every spiritual master, every awakened teacher faced fear. Not one of them bypassed the shadow. But they did something radical. They turned toward it, not to wrestle with it, but to reveal its emptiness. And in doing so, they taught us the same path. So the next time fear rises, and it will, do not flinch. Do not collapse. And above all, do not identify. Instead, remember, return, radiate. Let the light within you name what is true, and watch how quickly the illusion fades. Because in the end, fear is not your enemy. It is your opportunity to practice presence. Thought is not a passive stream. It is not background noise. It is not something that merely happens to you while life unfolds. Thought is the first act of creation, and until you claim this, you will continue trying to change your world by rearranging effects instead of addressing the cause. Everything visible began in the invisible. Every result you experience, whether glorious or painful, was born first in thought, either yours or someone else's that you allowed to influence you. The law of mind is exact. It does not play favorites. It responds to the dominant pattern you entertain, not the emotion you fake or the words you parrot without belief. You are not simply having thoughts. You are generating frequencies. You are broadcasting instructions to the universe every moment of the day through your thinking, not just what you hope, but what you habitually dwell upon, argue for, and react from. Most people treat their thinking like weather, as if thoughts arrive and depart on their own, as if moods govern the mind. But you are not the weather, you are the sky. And in that sky, thought is the painter. It sketches reality on the canvas of consciousness. Until you reclaim the authority of your own thinking, you will be a servant to borrowed ideas, conditioned beliefs, old conclusions that no longer serve you but still operate beneath your awareness like silent software. Thoughts are not innocent. They are formative. And what you think repeatedly, you begin to feel. What you feel consistently, you begin to believe. And what you believe, inevitably, you begin to live out. This is not theory. It is law. It is the foundation of every spiritual system that ever awakened true power. The mystics knew it. The metaphysicians proved it. Emmet Fox lived it. And now, it is your turn to embody it. The first transformation is not in your job, your body, your bank account, or your relationships. The first transformation must be in the laboratory of the mind. Until you change how you think, you cannot change what you attract, or more accurately, what you allow to flow through you. Christ consciousness does not float above the clouds. It operates through conscious thought. It does not bypass the mind. It illuminates it. It shows you again and again that the outer is only a printout of the inner, that what you are facing is not punishment, but projection, that your world is not happening to you, it is happening through you. This is not blame. This is empowerment. There is no shame in waking up to your part in the process. In fact, that's where your liberation begins. You may ask, how can I change thoughts I've thought for years? And the answer is, one moment at a time. Thought is not changed by force. It is changed by attention. You must begin noticing what you are noticing, catching the loops before they run their full course, interrupting the trance with a conscious decision to return to principle. And what is that principle? That you are not your thoughts. You are their source. That you are not defined by your reactions. You are the chooser of your focus. That you are not stuck in any condition. You are continuously radiating the cause of the next. This is not about pretending everything is fine. It's about shifting your center of gravity, moving from being thought by your mind to becoming the one who thinks deliberately. Start small. Recognize the recurring thought that drains you, the one that always arrives when you're tired, when you fail, when you feel left out. Then pause, not to argue with it, but to observe it. Shine the light on it. Ask, does this reflect the truth of what I am? If the answer is no, don't repress it. Release it. Replace it. Refocus. The law does not require you to be perfect. It requires you to be consistent, not rigidly, but faithfully. And faith is not blind. Faith is the ability to hold the unseen as more real than what's currently in front of you. That begins in thought. So when you feel stuck, you are not blocked. You are looping. When life feels dull, it is not because nothing is happening. It is because you're running the same thoughts and expecting new outcomes. Thought is not only the first act of creation, it is the continuous act of maintenance. You must not only build your inner world, you must tend to it, prune it, nourish it, watch for weeds, return to principle. Because until you take the reins of your thinking, someone else will. The news will. Your past will. Your old stories will. But when you begin to think as the Christ light thinks, not in words but in pattern, you become unstoppable. Not because life becomes easy, but because you become unshakable. Desire has been misunderstood for far too long. You've been told to distrust it, to tame it, to treat it like an unruly force needing suppression. But the truth is this: desire is not sin, it is direction. It is not a sign of selfishness, it is the whisper of the infinite nudging you forward. Desire, when rooted in truth, is the pulse of the Christ light moving through you. It does not originate in the ego, it originates in life itself, seeking fuller expression through your consciousness. Desire is divine intention knocking at the door of your awareness, asking, are you ready to radiate more of what you truly are? And yet, so many recoil when desire rises. They shrink from their own longing, judging it as greed, vanity, or distraction. But longing is not the enemy of spiritual maturity. Indulgence is. There is a difference. One pulls you upward, the other pulls you outward. True desire doesn't pull you into addiction, drama, or escape. It pulls you deeper into purpose. It awakens you from mediocrity. It won't let you settle for safety when your soul knows expansion is your nature. Emmet Fox never taught repression. He taught alignment. He knew that desire must be clarified, not condemned. When desire is left in the shadows, it festers. But when it is brought into the light of Christ consciousness, it transforms into vision, into calling, into action, aligned with spiritual law. Think of the seed. It doesn't apologize for wanting to grow. It doesn't wait for external approval before reaching for the sun, and neither should you. Desire is not a flaw in your system. It is the fuel. It is how spirit moves you beyond the past. It reveals that where you are now is not your final form, and that is not a judgment. It's a gift, a promise, a reminder that the infinite is never done expressing through you. Of course, not all desire is clean. Some desires are warped by fear, by ego, by old programming. That's why your task is not to kill desire, but to refine it, to sift it through spiritual understanding until what remains is pure. You do this not by asking, do I deserve this? But does this align with the truth of who I am becoming? Desire, when aligned with truth, never takes. It gives. It does not extract. It expands. It does not manipulate. It magnetizes. But to work with desire, you must first stop fearing it. You must stop treating it like a spiritual liability. When you treat your longing as suspect, you cut yourself off from your compass. You dull the signal. You forget that what you are drawn to, deeply, repeatedly, undeniably, is rarely random. It is often revelation in disguise. That creative project you keep pushing aside, that vision of a freer life you keep dismissing, that aching for more depth, more truth, more impact. These are not delusions. They are the inner sun warming the frozen parts of your purpose, asking to be felt. And you don't need a 5-year plan to honor them. You need willingness. You need clarity. You need to let go of the belief that spiritual people don't want anything. You were not meant to sit in neutral. You were designed for forward motion, not frantic activity, but conscious unfolding. And desire is how that unfolding begins. It does not guarantee the outcome, but it opens the path. A path not of fantasy, but of responsibility. Because once you admit your true desires, you must begin to walk toward them, or sit in the friction of resisting them. Desire, when honored, brings focus. It organizes your energy. It clears out the unnecessary. It gives you a reason to rise beyond excuses and distractions. It's not about chasing everything that glitters. It's about recognizing the gold already buried within you and letting your desire be the shovel that digs it out. You don't need to justify your desire for more peace, more purpose, more expression. You just need to honor it. Not with frantic action, but with sacred attention. Not with panic, but with presence. Every awakened life begins with a longing to return home to the truth, a longing to stop pretending, a longing to become fully available to the divine pattern encoded in your being. This longing is holy. This longing is yours. Let it speak. Let it guide. Let it burn away the lie that your desire disqualifies you from spiritual depth. That lie has kept too many souls dimmed and doubting. The Christ light within you does not reject desire. It fulfills it, reorders it, and channels it into holy momentum. So if you are still breathing, you are still becoming. And if you are still becoming, desire is still required. Trust it. Not blindly, but bravely. Because your desire, when aligned with truth, is the first signal that your next level is already waiting. Christ consciousness is not a person. It is not tied to a specific image, language, or historical moment. It is not bound by doctrine or ritual. It is not exclusive to those who wear a title or recite a creed. It is a state of realized identity, a living awareness that the divine is not above you, beyond you, or outside you. It is expressing through you. This truth is liberating and confronting. Because once you realize Christ consciousness is not something you receive, but something you awaken, you can no longer wait for permission. You can no longer pretend you are separate from the source of life itself. This consciousness does not speak in thunder. It does not demand worship. It moves quietly, through clarity, through presence, through acts of truth without performance. It is not mystical escape. It is sacred embodiment. And it is already within your system, waiting not for instruction, but for agreement. You were not born fallen. You were born radiant, with the full imprint of divine potential encoded in your being, not just as an idea, but as a law, as a pattern, as a living, breathing expression of truth. The Christ pattern is not just in you, it is you, at your most aligned and actualized state. When Emmet Fox spoke of Christ, he wasn't referring to a distant deity or dogma. He was pointing to a state of consciousness available to any soul, regardless of background. A consciousness where you stop reacting from ego and begin responding from truth. Where you no longer seek God as other, but begin living as the expression of divine principle itself. This is not arrogance. This is alignment. Because when you realize that the kingdom is within, you stop begging and start building. You stop pleading for miracles and start embodying the laws that produce them. To live from Christ consciousness is not to become perfect. It is to become present, fully present to the truth that nothing outside you holds power over you, that you are not a creature of chance, but a vessel of order, that the spirit of life does not visit you like a guest. It radiates through you like breath. This state of being doesn't require robes or candles. It requires honesty, brutal, beautiful, liberating honesty about what you've believed, about what you've avoided, about how often you've forgotten who you truly are. Christ consciousness is not a mood. It is not a performance of being spiritual. It is the unshakable knowing that no matter what the world says, the light within you cannot be corrupted. It can be obscured, yes, but never erased. And as that awareness deepens, something incredible happens. You stop outsourcing your authority. You stop needing external signs to confirm your path. You stop waiting for someone else to speak truth over you, because you've begun to speak it from within. This does not make you better than anyone else. It makes you more responsible. Because once you've touched this awareness, you can no longer play small. You can no longer participate in narratives of helplessness. You must now become what you've remembered. That means choosing integrity when it's inconvenient, choosing clarity over comfort, choosing principle over popularity. Not because you are performing, but because the light in you refuses to dim for the approval of others. You begin to see life differently. Situations that used to shake you become opportunities to remain anchored. Conversations that once triggered you become invitations to respond from knowing, not from wounding. You don't bypass the pain, you shine through it. This is the light of Christ, not the image, but the impulse, not the story, but the state. And in that state, love is not soft, it is strong. Truth is not abstract, it is action. Faith is not belief, it is embodiment. You are not here to merely worship Christ, You are here to live as a conscious extension of the same power he embodied, not in imitation, but in realization, not in ritual, but in radiance. And this realization does not inflate the ego, it dissolves it. It humbles you in the best way possible. Because when you see clearly, you realize that everyone carries the same seed. That every being, no matter how lost, how cruel, how broken seeming, is still made of the same light. Some have buried it deeply. Some have forgotten entirely, but the seed remains. So when you rise into this awareness, you rise not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. You become a living reminder that Christ consciousness is not for the few, but for the willing, for the honest, for the awake. And you don't need a title to live this truth. You need courage. Courage to be sovereign in a world that profits from your doubt. Courage to remember when others forget. Courage to carry light where there is none, not for show, but because it's who you are. You are not here to repeat ancient words. You are here to live the eternal pattern. And that pattern is Christ consciousness, moving, breathing, choosing through you. You are not a passive receiver of life. You are not a vessel drifting helplessly on the sea of circumstance, waiting for waves to settle before you move forward. You are the law in motion. Every spiritual law, whether you call it the law of mind, the law of cause and effect, or divine order, is not something separate from you. It is not a distant mechanism dispensing outcomes from the clouds. It operates through you. It expresses itself by how you think, how you feel, how you choose. You are the instrument, and the law is always playing through your frequency. There's a reason why things shift the moment you do. It's not a coincidence. It's not luck. It's not random. It's the law responding to your consciousness. The universe does not react to what you beg for. It responds to what you radiate. This is not about being high vibration in a superficial sense. This is about aligning your inner state with the principle of what you seek, before it shows up. And that alignment is not emotional hype. It is spiritual congruence. You don't draw peace by pleading for it. You create the mental and emotional atmosphere of peace, and peace reveals itself through the channel of your being. Emmet Fox understood this. He didn't teach people to wish for change. He taught them to become the change in consciousness, knowing that the external world would follow. He didn't ask his readers to wait on divine timing. He reminded them that divine law is now, and it is always now. To be in alignment doesn't mean you control every outcome. It means you take responsibility for the vibration you bring to every situation. You realize that life doesn't happen to you. It happens through your assumptions, your attention, your willingness to stay rooted in truth, no matter how loud appearances shout otherwise. When you truly embody this, desperation fades. You stop grasping. You stop trying to manipulate results with surface-level tactics. Instead, you become intentional, clear, steady. And this steadiness is not passive. It is potent. You no longer throw affirmations at the wall, hoping something sticks. You speak words backed by principle, with a heart uncluttered by doubt, and a mind willing to stay the course. You no longer pray from lack. You commune with power. You don't ask the universe to fix things. You ask yourself what truth you need to embody to let the solution flow. Because that's what the law responds to, not noise, not repetition, but coherence. This coherence isn't about being perfect, it's about being honest. When you're out of alignment, you'll feel it, not because you're being punished, but because the inner and outer are no longer in agreement. The dissonance is the signal, not the sentence. And it's not asking for guilt, it's asking for recalibration. You are the law in motion. And that law, when harmonized with truth, becomes your greatest ally. When misaligned, it becomes your greatest teacher. But either way, it is always moving, always responding, always mirroring. This is where spiritual accountability begins, not in guilt, not in over-analysis, but in recognition. When you start to notice how your assumptions generate experience, you reclaim your authorship. You realize that you are not powerless in the face of life's uncertainty. You are a creative being operating within a precise, intelligent field. And in that field, what you embody is more powerful than what you say. What you assume is more impactful than what you ask for. What you radiate in silence moves more than what you shout in panic. You do not need to chase miracles. You need to return to principle. Because from principle, all power flows. You don't need to become louder. You need to become clearer. Clear in thought, clear in motive, clear in truth. When clarity meets law, manifestation becomes natural. Let this sink in. Your job is not to force outcomes. Your job is to align with the truth of who you are and let that alignment shape your world. You are not a puppet of fate. You are not the aftermath of genetics or history. You are the law in motion, expressing through every thought you think and every state you hold. So hold wisely. Think deliberately. Radiate consciously. Not because the universe needs to be convinced, but because your consciousness determines the channel through which it moves. You don't have to wait for permission. You don't have to wait for better circumstances. You are already moving the law with every breath. The question is, are you moving it with clarity or confusion? The law does not rest. Neither does your power. So live awake, live in alignment, and watch how effortlessly life begins to respond, not to your words, but to your state. What you reject, you reinforce. It seems counterintuitive at first, the idea that by resisting something, you might actually be anchoring it more deeply into your experience. But this is the subtle precision of spiritual law. It does not respond to your intentions alone, but to your focus, your energy, and the emotional charge you wrap around a thing. When you reject something in fear, in shame, or in anger, you don't dissolve it, you deepen its grip. Because rejection is still a form of attention, and attention is creative. Christ consciousness does not operate through resistance, it operates through revelation. It doesn't need to shove darkness away, it shines through it. The sun never argues with the night, it simply rises. And yet, how often do we waste our energy swatting at shadows, reinforcing the very conditions we long to escape? Look closely at the things you push away, the thoughts you try to suppress, the traits you disown, the memories you bury, the patterns you deny. These are not simply bad things to erase. They are parts of your consciousness asking to be integrated, brought into truth, not banished by willpower. You were not designed to become holy by rejection. You were designed to become whole by recognition. There is a critical difference. Rejection says, I must not feel this, think this, be this. Recognition says, this is here. And now, with awareness, I choose again. One creates shame, the other creates sovereignty. Emmet Fox never taught suppression. He taught spiritual understanding. And understanding is the bridge between raw experience and divine clarity. It doesn't coddle dysfunction, but it doesn't condemn the self for having it either. It sees clearly, acts firmly, but never from fear. To reject something out of fear is to tell the subconscious mind, this has power over me. And the subconscious will believe you. It will work day and night to protect you from the thing you have declared as dangerous, even if that means blocking your joy, your voice, or your freedom to grow. The pattern you fight most intensely often holds a part of yourself you've abandoned. The trait you judge in others is frequently a mirror of the part you've disowned in yourself. And until you stop rejecting it, you can't choose differently. Because what is buried alive never dies, it influences from below. Christ consciousness invites a different approach, one of presence, of truth, of light so steady it no longer fears what arises within. Instead of pushing things down, it brings them up, not to drown in them, but to release them into clarity. You are not purified by punishment, you are refined by awareness. So when a limiting belief arises, don't push it away with force. Pause. Observe. Ask, what is the story here? Is this mine or inherited? Is this based in truth or in trauma? You don't need to get lost in analysis. You need only stay long enough to see clearly, then choose deliberately. When you reject, you react. When you recognize, you respond, and response is where your power lives. To be clear, this doesn't mean you must embrace every thought or tolerate every behavior. It means you must see without flinching. Own what is present without letting it define you. Face what has been feared, not to glorify it, but to dissolve its hold by shining truth into the places you once left dark. This is the spiritual warrior's path, not to eliminate all weakness, but to walk through shadow with such clarity that even weakness becomes an invitation to return to strength. The more you reject what is uncomfortable in yourself, the more split you become. The more you integrate, even the ugliest, rawest parts, the more unified your power becomes. The Christ light within you is not shocked by your humanity. It does not panic when old thoughts resurface. It is not intimidated by the mess. It sees clearly, holds firmly, and moves forward, not by suppression, but by substitution. You don't overcome hatred by yelling at it. You overcome hatred by choosing love. You don't eliminate confusion by rejecting it. You eliminate confusion by returning to truth. Every time you try to push something away without understanding it, you reinforce its foundation. So stop giving energy to the war against yourself. End the silent battles. Begin the conscious reclamation. Face what arises, not as a flaw to fix, but as feedback, and then realign. The more willing you are to see without resistance, the faster you heal. The less you judge, the more clearly you discern. The less you fear, the more freely you choose. And when you reach that point when nothing inside you is off limits to the light, you will become untouchable. Not because life will stop testing you, but because nothing within you will flinch when it does. You will no longer reinforce your limitations through rejection. You will dissolve them through radiant recognition. Pain is not your enemy. Let that land. Let it challenge every conditioned reflex you've inherited about suffering. Pain is not a punishment, and it is not a sign that something has gone wrong. Pain is an alarm, a message, a signal from your inner system, urging you to return to clarity, to alignment, to truth. You were not meant to live in pain, but you were also never promised a life free of it. The promise, if there is one, is this: that pain, when met with presence, becomes the portal. That when you stop resisting it and start listening, pain becomes the very tool that brings you back to the real. Pain does not arise in a vacuum. It is the echo of resistance. It emerges when your inner truth is denied, when your consciousness is misaligned, when your choices contradict your knowing. It does not come to punish, it comes to alert, like heat from a stove reminding you not to keep your hand there. The sting is not cruelty, it's intelligence. Yet so often, pain is misread as failure, as proof that you've somehow fallen off the path. But the path isn't about walking in constant ease. The path is about staying conscious, especially when things hurt. Christ consciousness isn't about floating above pain, it's about walking through it without losing your alignment. Emmet Fox never claimed a pain-free existence, but he knew pain could become a sacred ally when met with spiritual understanding. He knew it could burn away the illusions we cling to and leave us raw, but real. Pain doesn't ask for drama, it asks for presence. It doesn't need you to make meaning out of it while you're still in it. It simply asks that you stay awake, that you don't turn away from the mirror it holds up. Because behind every emotional wound is a misbelief, a lie you adopted about your worth, your place, your power. And pain, persistent and unrelenting, points you back to that lie until you question it, until you stop managing symptoms and start healing the root. But be warned, when pain is denied, it metastasizes. What is not healed becomes habit. It gets buried in the nervous system, coded into language, passed on through behavior. Whole lives are built around avoiding pain, but what you avoid eventually defines you. You cannot out-affirm your way past unacknowledged pain. You cannot spiritual bypass your way around a wounded inner child. You cannot meditate your way out of trauma you've never admitted to yourself. What is unspoken festers. What is unmet controls you. And still, none of that pain diminishes your light. None of it erases the Christ within. It doesn't corrupt your essence. It simply clouds it. And the more willing you are to face that fog with compassion instead of self-hatred, the faster it lifts. Pain, like all messengers, only shouts when you've ignored the whisper. It gets louder the longer it's misunderstood, but when you finally turn to face it, truly face it, without blame, without panic, it softens. It begins to teach. You begin to ask the real questions. What truth have I abandoned to feel safe? What pattern have I mistaken for identity? What part of me is asking to be seen, without shame? This is the alchemy of pain. When held in truth, it becomes fuel, not because you enjoy it, but because you stop fearing it, and what you no longer fear, you are no longer ruled by. Pain humbles you, but not in the way religion teaches. It doesn't make you small. It makes you honest. It strips away performance. It quiets ego. It sharpens your hearing for the voice within. You stop pretending. You start listening. And eventually, you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "What in me is ready to be made whole?" Christ consciousness doesn't remove the storms. It anchors you within them. It doesn't anesthetize you. It awakens you. And once you are awake, you stop needing the pain to shout. Because you finally answered the knock. You will still feel it. Of course you will. You are human. But you will no longer be lost in it. You will stop fearing its arrival, because now you know how to meet it with presence, with truth, with a fierce and quiet love that refuses to collapse. Pain, when processed, becomes perspective. It becomes wisdom. It becomes clarity with roots. So the next time it rises, and it will, don't rush to silence it. Don't rush to medicate it with distraction or spiritual cliches. Let it speak. Let it show you where you've forgotten your light. Let it be the teacher that brings you back, not to who you were, but to who you truly are. Because the Christ within you does not remove every wound. It redeems them. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is not passive. It is not something you offer to make peace with others. It is something you claim to make peace with yourself. True forgiveness is a spiritual authority move. It breaks the cycle. It reclaims the mind. Too often, forgiveness is treated as a soft moral virtue, a reluctant gesture to prove you're evolved. But in truth, it's one of the most potent tools in the metaphysical arsenal. Because until you forgive, you are trapped, not by what happened, but by the story you've allowed to harden around it. What you do not forgive, you rehearse. What you rehearse, you recreate. The law of mind does not pause while you hold a grudge. It keeps moving in response to your dominant emotional patterns. And resentment is a pattern with creative power, destructive power. Forgiveness is not about pretending it didn't hurt. It's not about letting someone off the hook. It's about letting yourself off the hook of carrying pain that is no longer serving your highest pattern. You're not erasing the past. You're refusing to let the past dictate your current vibration. Emmet Fox said, "If you could only love enough, you could be the most powerful person in the world." And that kind of love, unconditional, unshakable, releasing, begins with forgiveness, not just for others, but for you. Forgive yourself for not knowing better, for staying too long, for speaking when you should have stayed silent, and staying silent when you should have spoken. Forgive the version of you who made survival-based choices, not because it was all okay, but because it no longer needs to run your life. Forgiveness is not letting the past off the record. It is choosing to stop giving it creative authority in your present. You're not required to forget, but you are invited to let go of the emotional charge that keeps binding you to what was. Because memory doesn't bind you, emotion does. And the moment you unhook the charge, you're free. You remember, but from a higher altitude. The story no longer stings. The trigger no longer runs your nervous system. You've moved from being in the wound to being the witness. This is not bypassing, it's transcendence. It's the moment you step into the Christ pattern and say, "This stops with me." Not for martyrdom, but for mastery. Forgiveness, in this form, is active spiritual surgery. You remove the splinter, not with denial, but with light. You don't push the pain deeper. You bring it forward, you name it, you feel it, you own it, and then, with quiet authority, you release it. This does not require the other person to change. It does not require their remorse. That's the beauty and the challenge of spiritual law. It places the power fully in your hands. It asks, do you want to be right, or do you want to be free? Because make no mistake, unforgiveness feels like power, but it drains you. It eats bandwidth. It clouds vision. It hardens the heart and slows the flow of divine ideas. You think you're protecting yourself by holding on. But in truth, you are just building thicker walls around your own radiance. And beyond others, there's the deeper layer, forgiving life itself. Some of the greatest breakthroughs come when you stop resenting how it all unfolded. The timing, the betrayals, the seasons that felt wasted, the dreams that dissolved, the doors that closed, the identities that died. You wanted it to be different. Of course you did. But holding anger against the architecture of your journey only keeps you bitter and blind. Forgiveness is not saying, this was good. It's saying, this is no longer in charge. You begin to look at the past not as failure, but as formation. You begin to recognize how even the hardest moments shaped your clarity, refined your calling, and brought you to the edge of transformation. The moment you forgive is the moment the story starts to shift. Not because it becomes perfect, but because you're no longer feeding the pattern that kept you stuck. You stop identifying as the hurt one. You start identifying as the healer, and not just for yourself, but for those around you. Because when you walk in forgiveness, you radiate something rare. You become a living contradiction to the culture of resentment. You hold your boundaries without holding your breath. You release the pain without releasing your power. And most of all, you begin to think clearly again, because unforgiveness clouds the mind. It spins your attention in loops. It drains intuition. But forgiveness, it's pure mental clarity. It's emotional sovereignty. It's psychic spaciousness. And in that space, divine ideas begin to flow again. You begin to create, not react. You begin to radiate, not defend. This is the real alchemy, the kind that doesn't just patch wounds, but dissolves the very need to carry them any further. So today, boss, if you're holding on to a pattern, a person, a season of life with clenched fists, ask yourself, what would it look like to forgive this, not because it was okay, but because you're ready to be free? Christ consciousness does not command you to forget. It empowers you to remember from a higher state. And in that state, forgiveness is not surrender. It is sovereignty. The word you speak becomes flesh. It always has. It always will. Not metaphorically, not poetically, literally. The words you speak carry vibration, and vibration shapes form. There is no idle talk in the realm of spiritual law, only creative command or unconscious permission. You've been conditioned to treat speech casually, to toss phrases without awareness, to narrate your limitations as if they were facts. But words are more than sounds. They are blueprints. They don't merely describe your reality, they structure it. When Emmet Fox taught about the mental equivalent, he didn't stop at thought. He included speech. Because what you say repeatedly becomes what you believe. And what you believe sets the mold for what life delivers. Speak sickness long enough, and the body listens. Speak lack often enough, and the mind will filter out opportunity. Speak fear, and your nervous system will shape itself to avoid aliveness. It is not punishment. It is law. The Christ light within you is not neutral toward language. It responds to clarity, to precision, to integrity. When you speak from that place, not from panic, not from performance, but from truth, you activate the creative engine in your own consciousness. Every word carries weight, and your life will, over time, take the shape of your dominant verbal patterns. This is not superstition, it's structure. When you say, I always get overlooked, you reinforce the mental structure that produces that experience. When you say, "I'm not good with money," you aren't just narrating the past, you're encoding the future. When you call yourself lazy, broken, unlucky, or too late, you're not being honest, you're being hypnotized by repetition. Words carve grooves in your subconscious, and the deeper the groove, the more energy flows through it, until it becomes a channel too deep to escape without conscious redirection. But here's the miracle. You can speak a new pattern into being, right now. You don't need perfect belief at first. You need willingness. You need consistency. You need to start treating your words like tools, not noise. This doesn't mean faking it. This means choosing language that aligns with principle, even before the result shows up. Not to manipulate, but to affirm, to bring into form, the truth already present at a spiritual level. And truth never contradicts itself. You can't say, "I trust the process," and then follow it with, "Nothing ever works out for me." You can't affirm abundance and then complain about cost. You can't pray for healing and then repeat the diagnosis like it's your name. This is not about guilt. This is about authority. When you recognize that your words shape your world, you stop speaking carelessly. You stop echoing fear. You stop borrowing phrases from people who have no interest in liberation. You begin to build a verbal environment where your soul can breathe. Speak like someone who remembers their source. Speak as if the law is listening, because it is. Speak to reinforce your identity, not your history. Speak what you want to multiply, not what you want to escape. This doesn't mean avoiding hard truths. It means framing them from power. Instead of, "I'm overwhelmed," say, "I'm learning to create space." Instead of, "I always mess this up," say, "I'm refining how I approach this." Instead of, "I'll never get there," say, "I'm aligning more clearly with where I'm going." This shift is not cosmetic. It's foundational. Because every time you speak with intention, you set a new point of attraction. You vibrate a new message through your nervous system. You tell your subconscious, "This is where we live now." And soon enough, the world catches up. Not instantly, not magically, but steadily, faithfully, just as law has always promised. You don't need to chant or shout. You need to speak from knowing, even if your voice shakes, even if the old patterns scream louder at first. Speak anyway. Speak as if your words are building something solid, because they are. The Christ light does not speak to flatter or to fear. It speaks from center, from unwavering truth. And when you speak from that same place, your voice becomes a vessel of transformation, not just for you, but for everyone it touches. Speak less to impress. Speak more to imprint. Speak from soul, not script. Because every word is an investment, and your return will match its quality. So build carefully, declare boldly. And most of all, speak like someone who remembers they are made of the same substance as the word that was there in the beginning. Your voice is not just expression, it is initiation. Faith is not passive, it is not soft. It is not simply hoping that things will work out. It is not closing your eyes, crossing your fingers, and waiting for life to align itself with your dreams. Real faith is not wishful thinking. It is spiritual conviction in motion, a knowing that becomes action, a posture of certainty, even when results haven't yet appeared. Faith is a creative force, not a comfort blanket. It moves, it builds, it holds its shape under pressure. It doesn't fold in the face of delay. It sharpens. It doesn't collapse when tested. It anchors. When properly understood, faith is the highest form of clarity, and clarity, boss, is magnetic. Emmet Fox made it clear. It is the law that what you think in your mind, you will produce in your life. But thought without faith is static. Faith is what breathes life into thought. It is the silent engine behind every meaningful manifestation. It is what keeps you standing in spiritual fact even when physical fact hasn't caught up yet. Faith is not about avoiding doubt. It's about standing taller than it. It is the deliberate act of claiming what is true in spirit, even when your senses report otherwise. You don't fake confidence. You align with the deeper current that runs beneath emotion and outcome. This is why faith cannot be conditional. If you only trust when it's easy, you don't have faith. You have preference. If you only stay the course when signs are favorable, you're not grounded. You're gambling. Faith means acting in accordance with truth, especially when appearances shout the opposite. It means you show up as if the answer already exists, because it does, in consciousness. This doesn't mean spiritual arrogance. It means spiritual responsibility. You aren't trying to make things happen through force. You're cooperating with a law that responds to mental atmosphere. And that atmosphere is shaped most powerfully not by emotion, but by faith. Faith is the refusal to abandon principle just because your feelings are fluctuating. It's the choice to keep thinking from cause, not reacting to effect. Faith is showing up to your purpose before the applause arrives. It's sowing seeds before you see sprouts. It's speaking truth over your life before anyone else believes it. It's building the ark when the skies are clear, not because you're afraid of rain, but because you're listening to something deeper than weather. And here's the secret. Faith feels different. It has a texture, a rhythm, a weight. You can sense it in your body when you're in it. Your breath deepens, your spine straightens, your mind quiets, not from suppression, but from alignment. You begin to act differently, not frantically, but deliberately. You move with a rhythm that's not dictated by fear. You stop grasping for quick fixes. You start building with intention. You stop begging and start embodying. You stop waiting and start walking. Faith is walking toward what has not yet appeared, not because you're in denial, but because you know how law works. You don't need guarantees. You don't need approval. You need alignment. And once you have that, the how becomes secondary. You become more interested in what you are being than in what is arriving. And you will be tested. Life will ask you, do you still believe when it's quiet? Do you still walk when it's uphill? Do you still hold your truth when you're surrounded by doubt? Those moments are not punishment. They are proving grounds. They refine your trust. They show you that your center isn't in outcomes, it's in principle. Faith doesn't prevent storms, but it builds you into the kind of vessel that doesn't capsize when they come. Christ consciousness is not about staying high when life dips low. It's about staying rooted when winds howl. It's about looking chaos in the eye and knowing, not hoping, that you're built for this. You don't need loud declarations. You need quiet certainty. You need spiritual congruence between what you believe and how you move. That's faith. You don't need to feel unshakable every moment. You just need to keep choosing truth over fear, again and again, until it becomes second nature. This is what the world needs. Not more spiritual quotes, but more spiritually grounded people. People whose faith shows up in how they speak, how they work, how they rise after a hard season. And that person is you. Let faith not be something you study, but something you live. Let it be action. Let it be atmosphere. Let it be your silent agreement with the laws that never change, no matter how loud the world becomes. Because when you move in faith, you move the law. The world is not outside you. It feels like it is. You've been taught that it is. You were raised to believe in an out there that determines your in here, that events happen to you, that conditions define you, that you are reacting to a world separate from your consciousness. But that's illusion. That's surface-level perception, and it's time to rise above it. The outer world, the circumstances, relationships, finances, health, opportunities, is not a dictator. It is a reflector. It mirrors the patterns of thought, belief, and emotional energy you carry. You are not a puppet in a random play. You are both stage and script. You are both the projection booth and the screen. The world is not happening to you. It is happening through you. This is not to say that everything you experience is your fault. This is to say that everything you experience is flowing through a filter. And that filter is your state of consciousness. Until you change that, everything you touch will take on the shape of your inner world. You cannot clean a mirror by wiping the glass. You clean it by adjusting what it reflects. And so it is with life. You can chase different jobs, different cities, different people, but unless you address the consciousness you're bringing with you, you're just rearranging the scenery of the same inner play. This is why surface-level change is so exhausting. You try to shift the outer world with hustle, pressure, and control. You try to manipulate outcomes. But if the inner pattern remains the same, the outer result snaps back like elastic. You may create short-term wins, but they don't hold, because the root has not shifted. Christ consciousness calls you inward, not to escape the world, but to transform it from the only place transformation begins, your own field of awareness. You're the atmosphere you walk in, your tone, your mood, your assumptions. They saturate your environment. People feel it, opportunities feel it. Even so-called coincidences bend toward the magnetic field of your presence. If you walk around with a deep belief in struggle, you will interpret every neutral situation as resistance. If you carry a belief in lack, you will miss the abundance sitting in plain sight. If you hold tightly to wounds, the world will keep volunteering actors to reenact your pain. Not because life is cruel, but because law is precise. It delivers not what you want, but what you are consistently being. This is not fatalism, it's liberation. Because it means you don't have to wait for the world to shift. You can shift. And when you do, everything around you begins to echo the change. Think about this. When you start treating yourself with more respect, others mysteriously do the same. When you stop tolerating the low-frequency conversations in your mind, your environment becomes quieter, sharper, more intentional. When you start walking as someone who knows they are supported, guidance appears where you once saw confusion. It's not magic, it's alignment. And it works in reverse too. If you feel that everything is falling apart, pause. Don't panic. Don't point outward. Ask gently, where has my inner atmosphere drifted from truth? What have I begun to assume again? Where have I let fear narrate the story? You don't need to condemn yourself. You need to recalibrate. The world is a faithful echo chamber. It cannot lie. It can only reflect. And sometimes what it reflects is the exact friction you need to face yourself again. Not to punish you, but to pull you back into authorship. Emmet Fox knew this. He taught that to change your life, you must change your thought. And to change your thought, you must know who you are. Not a victim of the material plane, but a spiritual being working with law, not luck. That means you're not here to react to what's out there. You're here to govern from within. You're not here to fix the world from the outside in. You're here to bring your world into order by bringing yourself into order. And order is not rigidity, it's coherence. It's when your thoughts, your emotions, your choices, and your words all begin to move in the same direction. It's when your inner compass stops spinning and starts pointing again, toward truth, toward peace, toward clarity. When you reach that level of internal integrity, the outer world starts reflecting miracles that were always trying to reach you, but had no channel to land in. So stop watching the world like a movie someone else is directing. Start observing it as a mirror that cannot help but reflect your stance. Speak to it from your center. Don't beg it to change. Show it the change. And then trust what comes next. Because the moment you shift internally, the entire pattern rearranges externally, not as a favor, as a law. Imagination is the bridge. It is the sacred space between spirit and form, idea and experience, unseen and seen. You've been told that imagination is child's play, fantasy, escape, indulgence. But in truth, imagination is one of the most powerful instruments of divine expression you possess. It is the tool the infinite uses to show you what's possible before it becomes visible. Everything you've ever built, solved, created, or healed began in image. Not just a thought, but a vision held with clarity and emotional weight. The mind doesn't move on logic alone, it moves on pictures, and those pictures set the mold. As Emmet Fox said, the mental image is the first stage in the realization of your desire. What you can vividly and consistently imagine, you begin to form in the substance of consciousness. And that substance, like clay, responds not to vague desire, but to distinct design, a blueprint, a clear mold. This is why imagination is not luxury, it is responsibility. You are imagining all the time, whether consciously or not. Most people use imagination destructively. They rehearse worst-case scenarios, loop old traumas, run internal dialogues of failure and rejection. They don't call it imagination, they call it reality. But it's just misdirected creative power. Your subconscious doesn't know the difference between a remembered image and a constructed one. It accepts what you repeatedly feed it. And from that acceptance, it begins to shape your responses, perceptions, decisions, eventually your outcomes. Imagination, boss, is how you begin to feel your way into a new state of being. It's not pretending, it's preparing. When you engage imagination spiritually, you're not escaping, you're aligning. You're stepping into the energy of the solution before the form arrives. You're becoming available to the answer before the outer world offers it, and availability matters more than desire. It's not enough to want healing. You must begin to imagine what it feels like to live without the wound. It's not enough to want success. You must begin to walk in the posture of someone who trusts themselves to lead. It's not enough to want love. You must begin to embody the version of you who believes they are already worthy of being deeply met. This is not delusion, it's rehearsal. It's the energetic equivalent of pre-paving the road with your inner state. You're building in consciousness what will later be built in time. Christ consciousness uses imagination not for ego gratification, but for soul alignment. You don't imagine just to get something. You imagine to become someone who is more honest, more grounded, more congruent with truth. This is why vague imagining leads nowhere. You must bring your vision into detail, see it, feel it, hear the sounds of that future life. Not with strain, but with reverence. Let your body register what it would be like to walk through that world with ease. And if resistance comes up, good. That's where the real work begins. Resistance reveals the cracks in your old pattern. It shows you where your current identity doesn't yet match your desired reality. Don't avoid the friction. Use it. Refine the image until it stops clashing with guilt, shame, or doubt. You are not visualizing to force the universe's hand. You are clearing inner space to let the law do what it already knows how to do. Move energy into form through channels you cannot yet predict. And imagination opens those channels. Begin every day not with to-do lists, but with to-be lists. Who must I be to live in alignment with the truth I say I believe? What version of me already knows how to move through this next level with integrity and joy? See that version, not once, but repeatedly, until it no longer feels foreign, until it becomes normal. And when it becomes normal, life shifts to match it, not because of magic, but because of mental cause. Imagination is how you remember what your soul already knows. It is not invention, it is revelation. It is your inner compass whispering, "This is possible. This is next. This is you." Treat it with care. Don't drag old pain into new images. Don't use it to argue for struggle. Use it to re-script the film playing on the screen of your awareness. Use it to stretch into the shape of the life already seated within you. Because what you imagine from truth, you are already beginning to live. And what you live repeatedly in the inner world will sooner or later find a way into the outer one. So honor the bridge, walk it often, and do not mistake the unseen for unreal. Authority must be claimed, not awaited. You were never meant to wait for power, not from a teacher, not from a title, not from a moment where everything feels just right. Spiritual authority is not something granted by an external force. It is something recognized, remembered, and claimed. And if you do not claim it, boss, you will drift. You will default to the old roles, the seeker, the struggler, the one who's almost ready. You'll mistake humility for hesitancy and mistake waiting for wisdom. But there comes a point in the spiritual path where delay becomes denial, not of ego, but of essence. You don't need another sign to validate what you already feel rising in you. You don't need to be picked. You've already been placed. The question is not whether you're worthy. The question is whether you're willing to step forward without the outer world's applause. Authority is not arrogance. It is alignment. It's the spiritual confidence of someone who knows who they are, not because of what they've achieved, but because of what they've remembered. The Christ light within you does not hesitate. It does not question its role. It does not shrink in the face of resistance. It radiates. It governs. It expresses, not to impress others, but to fulfill its nature. So why, boss, do you keep waiting? For the feeling to be perfect? For the plan to be complete? For permission from people who cannot see your blueprint? You will not be appointed by the crowd. You will not be discovered by chance. You must step into your own voice and declare what has been true from the beginning. You are the one responsible for how your light moves in this world. You don't need to convince anyone. You don't need to be loud. Authority isn't noise, it's presence. The quiet force that walks into a room and shifts the atmosphere because it's rooted, not rattled. You feel it when someone speaks from this place, not with force, but with finality. This kind of spiritual authority isn't dramatic, it's steady. It knows how to say no without guilt, how to say yes without apology, and how to say enough without rage. It is not about control, it is about coherence. When your thoughts, beliefs, actions, and identity are no longer in conflict, authority emerges as a byproduct. It's not something you turn on, it's something that radiates naturally when you stop outsourcing your center. You stop needing external validation when you start standing in spiritual fact. And here is the fact. You are not a student of truth indefinitely. You are becoming its embodiment. You are not just absorbing wisdom. You are becoming a channel through which it flows. And that requires authority, not entitlement, but embodiment. When Emmet Fox taught divine law, he didn't just explain it. He lived it. He walked in it. He didn't shrink when critics arose. He didn't dilute truth to gain comfort. He stood firm because he understood this one principle. When you speak from alignment, authority is built into your words. So let's make it clear. You don't grow into authority by performing spirituality. You grow into it by honoring spiritual law, especially when it's inconvenient. When fear rises and you don't flinch, that's authority. When doubt whispers and you choose clarity anyway, that's authority. When you move forward even when applause is absent, that's authority. When you refuse to shrink to fit someone else's comfort zone, that's authority. You claim it through choice, through integrity, through pattern. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop chasing approval, you become magnetic. Not because you've manipulated perception, but because truth has a vibration that can't be ignored. The Christ pattern lives through you only when you stop looking around to see if it's safe to speak, to lead, to move. Spiritual authority is not about never stumbling, it's about standing again with deeper clarity. It's about no longer negotiating with voices that don't carry your assignment. You were not sent here to be neutral. You were not sent here to dilute. You were sent here to express a specific current of divine intelligence, and no one else can carry it in quite the way you can. Authority begins when you stop postponing that role. So if the voice of doubt still tries to whisper, who are you to lead? Who are you to speak truth? Who are you to stand in light? You respond with calm certainty, I am the one who stopped waiting. And from that moment forward, the law begins to move with new precision. Not because it favors you, but because it was waiting for you to finally favor yourself. Stand tall, speak with clarity, act with consistency, lead with light. Because when authority is claimed from alignment, it becomes unstoppable. The inner sun never sets. No matter the hour, the season, or the storm, your light is still burning. Quietly, faithfully. Not as a reward for effort, not as a fleeting mood, but as a spiritual constant. It is your essence, not your decoration. And it has never stopped shining, even when you forgot it was there. You've lived through darkness. You've walked through disappointment, fatigue, rejection, uncertainty. You've questioned your worth. You've doubted your direction. You've stood at thresholds where nothing made sense. And yet here you are, still breathing, still searching, still ready to align again. That readiness is the light. That willingness is the proof. You don't have to feel radiant to be radiant. The sun doesn't ask for confirmation before it rises. It rises because it is. The Christ light within you is not reactive. It's not tied to emotion. It doesn't waver when you're low. It doesn't shrink when you're confused. It doesn't disappear when you're angry or weary. It holds, always. Because it's not something you earned, it's something you are. That is the truth Emmet Fox taught again and again, that divinity is not some distant reward waiting for you on the other side of effort. It is the source of your life, already within you, waiting only for recognition. And recognition is the turning point. Not striving, not pleading, not begging the universe to remember you. You remember it. You remember the eternal center within you that has never been touched by fear, never dimmed by failure, never reduced by circumstance. Your mind may forget, your emotions may shake, but the light remains. And when you choose to align with it, through thought, through word, through action, you begin to walk as someone who no longer looks to the horizon for light, but realizes it's already here. You do not need to chase the sun. You are the sun, not in ego, but in essence. You are here to illuminate not just for others, but for yourself. You are here to burn away illusion, not with heat, but with clarity. You are here to stand as a living, breathing reminder that truth does not flicker when life gets loud. And that means no season has power over you, no delay defines you, no mistake disqualifies you. When shadows stretch across your life, remember, they are not the absence of light. They are the obstruction of perspective. And even when your outer world dims, the source of your power has not moved. This is why no one can truly steal your peace, not permanently, because it is not housed in a relationship, a title, a number, or a destination. It is sourced from the unshakable presence of what you are beneath the surface, eternal, radiant, real. You don't need to maintain a spiritual high to walk in this light. You only need to stop arguing with your radiance, stop narrating from your wounds, stop borrowing language from fear, and instead speak, move, act, and decide, as someone who remembers, I carry the sun within me, and it never sets. This doesn't mean you will never struggle. It means you'll stop making struggle your identity. It means you will stop confusing temporary difficulty with permanent definition. It means that no matter how long the night seems, you will hold the knowing. The light is already rising within me. When you know this, not just as a belief, but as a stance, you become luminous in every room. You bring calm into chaos, direction into confusion, and perhaps most powerfully, you bring patience into process. Because you no longer need results to feel whole. You are already seated in truth. This is your spiritual inheritance, not someday, not if you meditate long enough, not if you cleanse all karma. Now the inner sun has no off switch, only your awareness dims and brightens, and now that you've remembered, you no longer have to chase. You can simply return again and again to the knowing that changes everything. The light I seek is the light I am. Now let your breath settle. Let the momentum of this journey soften into stillness, not an ending, but a resting place, a quiet return to center where all the teachings converge, not as ideas to memorize, but as truths you've begun to live. You've walked through a landscape of spiritual clarity. You've faced the illusions of fear. You've reclaimed your authority. You've remembered your light. And perhaps most importantly, you've realized that nothing outside of you holds the key to your becoming. It was always within. It has always been waiting, not for perfection, but for presence. So let the words fade now. Let the silence teach you. Let the vibration of what has been stirred settle deeply into your nervous system, not just as insight, but as identity. You don't need to rush to apply everything. You need only become available to what is already true. You are not a beginner to this work, you are a carrier of it, a living instrument of divine law, a reflection of the eternal light that burns in all things. So tonight, or this morning, or whenever your soul finds these words, rest not in performance, but in pattern, the pattern of radiance, the pattern of sovereignty, the pattern of the Christ consciousness that never falters, never fades, and never forgets you. Because you, dear soul, are not separate from the source. You are the light, you are the law, you are the radiance, and the inner sun never sets.